Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Ship and Read. Today I'll be doing a book recommendations video. So I'm really excited to share these all with you. I'm not going to go too much into all of them because there are 10 books on this list and I have a wide range of variety. I have nonfiction on here, I have fantasy, I have historical fiction, just like so many varieties on here. So hopefully there's at least one book for all of you guys out there. So the first book that I want to recommend is Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. This is the one book I believe that I read in 2017, but this was my favorite book of 2017. So this is a multi-generational saga that follows one Korean family from the early 1900s when they end up moving to Japan. And of course in that time period they end up getting caught up with a lot of wars, as well as facing discrimination against foreigners from Japanese. So like I said already, this was probably my favorite book of 2017. It was just so good. I also did a full book review back when I started this channel with Emily, so I will link that somewhere above in case you want to check that out. But I just loved how this book encompassed so many different elements, from racism to relationships to family dynamics, cultural aspects, and just so much more. And despite the book being pretty long, I want to say it was about 500 pages or so, it flew by so fast, and every time I picked up this book I was like, I wanted to find out more about this family. And it was also really fascinating to see how each generation, everyone's concerns and priorities shifted depending on the era that they were in, the outside surroundings, like all that stuff. And it was just really fascinating to read this story about one Korean family and just how everything shifted as time went on. And it was just so fascinating and so good. And even to this day, it's still probably one of the best books I have ever read. Like top 10 for sure. So if you're looking for something that is historical fiction, something that's a multi-generational saga, something about cultural, about racism, like all those different elements and aspects, then I highly recommend this book for you. And even if you're not looking for it, well, I'm still recommending this book for you. Then the next book that I want to recommend is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. This book just came out and it's already on this list, so imagine how awesome this book is. So this book follows a young woman called January who's kind of a strange and curious child. She was raised by a wealthy benefactor because her father was always traveling for work and her mother was MIA at this point. And one day she finds this mysterious book that talks about doorways into other worlds. And as the book continues, you find out there's just so much magic, so much romance, so much adventure, and it was just such a beautifully written book as well. So the reason why I want to recommend this book to you guys is because if you guys lyrical writing, if you guys love beautiful prose, if you love books that surprise you and ends up going in a direction that you never expected and in a good way, then this is definitely the book for you. Because in the beginning I thought this book was about magical doorways, portals, all that stuff, but this book is so much more. I think after I read this I was like, oh my god, like I did not know that this was what this book was about. Like it shook me and it was so good, guys. I don't usually even like slow-paced books because this book is a little bit slow-paced, especially in the beginning. I actually consider DNFing this book, guys. So that goes to show that I went from debating if I should DNF this book to recommending this book as one of my favorite standalone books. This book was just goated. Then the next book that I want to recommend to you guys is a non-fiction called Radium Girls by Kate Moore. And it follows the history and what really happened for the Radium Girls. And this was a story that I didn't even know existed. It's set in America around the 1910s or the 1920s, and it talks about radium and how they were basically in factories, and the factory workers were usually women because during that time period there was also a war going on. So all the men were off fighting the war and the girls were working in these factories where they were painting all these radium, like these dials with radium paint. And what happened to them and the controversy that happened to them, the lawsuits, what happened to the businesses was just so fascinating. Like it was just so interesting because this is a story, like I said already, that I never knew about. And for me to read about something like this, that the after effects just ended, I want to say like maybe 10 years ago, where the radiation in that area has finally dissipated like to more of like a normal level, I want to say. The fact that I didn't even know about this is just shocking, because that means that this whole situation lasted for 100 years, guys. Like 1910 to what, 2010, that is 100 years, guys. So the fact that I didn't even know about this story, the fact that this story existed and that most people didn't know about this, because after I read this book I asked everyone around me if they even knew about this story, and I told them to read this book, because the fact that like no one I knew about this is just shocking. Because you will think that the history books would teach us about this, you will think that someone would teach us about this growing up, but that was not the case at all. And to find this in a book and that it was actual history, and I even googled and researched and did all of that stuff after reading it because it was just so intriguing to me. And even now I'm still thinking hardcore about how intense this book was, and I have no words, guys. Just this is why I like nonfiction sometimes, because you learn about all these history that you might not have actually even known before, and the fact that it had such a huge impact on America and our society, and the fact that I didn't even know about it is just, I have no words. If there's one book on here that you want to check out, if there's one book on here that you want to read outside of your comfort zone, because I know a lot of people don't read nonfiction, then definitely check out this one. Because, and check this on audiobook too, because I feel like the narrator did a really good job with just bringing all the characters to life and stating the facts without actually making it seem like they are just facts, but making it so that you feel connected to all the women that were impacted by this situation. Then the next book that I have on here is something that's also kind of interesting as well. It's a historical fiction, but it comes from a true story. And this book is called Before We Were Yours by Lisa Wingate. So this is a historical fiction about the Tennessee Children's Home Society orphanage, where essentially this society, this organization, will go out, kidnap these poor children from poor families and essentially sell them to wealthy families all across America. So this book follows two timelines. One is in the 1930s/1940s. It follows a young girl called Rill with her four younger siblings, and one day her mother got sick and her father brought her to the hospital. So they left their children at home, and next thing they know, a bunch of strangers come crashing in and basically just kidnaps them. At first they try to reassure them like, hey, don't worry, you know, your parents told us to come here to look after you guys, but we need to go to this place with us. And of course they're young children, so they go with them, and before they know it, Rill and her siblings are fighting to stay together. And then in the second timeline, we follow Avery, who is in present day, and she has been born into privilege, so her family is extremely well off. One day she helps her father going through some sort of health crisis, and in doing so she faces a chance encounter that soon forces her to look into her past and find out the secret that her family has been hiding for generations. So this is another book where it's actually a reflection on a real life situation. I believe the real life person behind everything was called Georgia Tan. It was her scandal. I want to say it's in the South as well, and how she was also the person in charge of this whole organization that went out and kidnapped children and sold them to rich families. Like I said already, I just like the idea of being able to find out about real life situations through books. And I know this is a historical fiction versus whereas Radium Girls is nonfiction, so all of that is true, but this one, it's technically not true. Like the author obviously put in some fictional facts into it and fictionalized it for readers, but the core history and the core story that she used for as inspiration for this book is completely true. So if you're looking for a book that maybe you don't want to go into nonfiction, maybe you don't want to go into the nitty-gritty details and facts, then definitely check out this one, because this one kind of incorporates the fictionalized aspect of books surrounding a real life event. So if you're not ready to step into the nonfiction world, then I think this book is a really good first step for you to kind of dip your toes in to what really happened, but in a fictionalized setting. So this is another book that I highly recommend, guys. It's so freaking good. Okay, then the next book that I want to recommend is completely on a different scope here, because this is a YA fantasy, and it's called Tequila Kingdom by Alexandra Christo. So basically this is a dark retelling of Little Mermaid. It follows Lyra, who is a siren princess, and one day she ends up doing something stupid, essentially, where she kills a mermaid, and her mother, who is the sea queen, decides to punish her by actually transforming her into a human. And Lyra is also known to the sea folk as the Princess Bane, because every year for her birthday she'll actually go out and seek a prince's heart and basically steals it, aka she kills the prince. And so she's known to both humans and sea folk that she is the Princess Bane. So it's kind of an ironic thing where her mother decides to turn her into a human and tells her that she cannot turn back into a siren until she goes off and takes the heart of a prince. His name is Prince Elian, because he is known as the siren killer. So that is the general gist of the story. This was definitely one of the better retellings I have read in a very long time. I really liked how dark it was, and I really liked the whole enemies to lovers trope as well. I also really liked the characters. I thought they were really complex. So if you're looking for an amazing dark retelling of a classic fairy tale, then I highly recommend this one. Then the next book I want to recommend to you is a book that's on a completely different tangent because it's a cute graphic novel called The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang. This was such an adorable read, guys. It was also a really quick read, so if you're looking for something really short, then this is a little book for you guys. It follows a young prince called Sebastian, whose parents are trying to find him a bride at this point, but he's trying to hide his secret life, where he dresses up in dresses and goes out into town as Lady Crystalia. And his secret is only shared with his closest friend called Frances, who is also his dressmaker. However, her dream is to become famous and be known as a dressmaker. But because of Sebastian's secret, her dressmaking skills must also be kept as a secret. So the book really follows two questions. One is, how long can Frances hold off her own dream for Sebastian's secret life? And number two, when will Sebastian feel comfortable sharing that part of himself with the people that he loved as well as his people as the prince? This book was such a heartwarming novel. It has such gorgeous artwork as well. So if you're looking for a really cute graphic novel, if you're looking for a book with a lot of positive messages about acceptance, about going after your dreams and all that stuff, then I definitely recommend this one. Okay, then the next one that I want to share with you guys is another favorite. These are all favorites, but this one is Sorcery of Thrones by Margaret Rogerson. So this book follows a young girl called Elizabeth who has been living in this library her entire life. But her library is not your average library because her library is a magical library, and it only houses magical grimoires, which are basically these spell books that are written by sorcerers, and each of them have their own personalities. So these libraries kind of have a weird mission because on one hand, they want to keep the people safe. So they want to protect them from these magical grimoires. On the other hand, because they are so unique and they're basically one of a kind, they also want to protect these grimoires. So that's kind of what the purpose of these libraries are for. And Elizabeth herself has also grown up with the knowledge and assumption that all sorcerers are evil. However, one day something happens where a magical grimoire escapes, and in the meantime, a warden of the library actually gets murdered, and somehow she gets implicated in this whole crime, and she has to actually go to the city right now to prove her innocence, I suppose. However, in doing so, something else happens, and now she only has one person that she can turn to. His name is Nathaniel, and he's a sorcerer, as well as his demon slave Silas. So as the book continues, she finds out there's a huge conspiracy going on. There's also romance involved, and of course there is a wonderful character called Silas. This book was just so good, from the characters to the plot to the writing. I thought everything was really well done, but my favorite part would definitely be the characters. I especially love Silas. Anyways, this book is so good. If you like a really well thought out plot, if you love beautiful writing, if you love great characters, then this is definitely a book for you. On that happy note, the next book that I want to recommend is the complete opposite, and that is Nightingale by Chris and Hannah. So this is another historical fiction, but this one is set during World War II in France. It follows two sisters. One is Vienne, who is forced to house a Nazi in her home, and the other sister is called Isabelle, who, because she's trying to find herself and search for her own purpose in life during this war, she ends up joining the resistance. And so the book just really follows both of their journey in trying to survive and fight back as much as they can. This was a book that was very emotional. It definitely made me tear up a little bit, but the standout for this book was definitely the characters. I thought that Vienne and Isabelle were just, guys, they were so well done. There were just so many struggles that the two of them faced in their own very different ways. Sometimes I was able to relate with them, sometimes I wasn't able to relate with them, sometimes I understood them, sometimes I was like, what the fuck are you doing? And I think that goes to show just how complex their characters were. So the fact that Chris and Hannah was able to write these really well developed characters, very intricate characters, I think is a testament to her writing skills. And not only were her characters so well done and just so well thought out, but the plot itself was just so intense as well. So if you're looking for historical fiction, then this is another book for you. So there's actually a number of historical fictions when I think about it. Yeah, but they're all really good. So I have two more books for you guys, and they're both kind of different. The first one is, of course, I have to recommend this book, and that is called The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. At this point, I don't think I really need to go into detail about this book. I just feel like it has been on the New York's bestseller for, I want to say, like 2 years straight, like #1 spot. That is, I want to say unheard of, but honestly I don't really know, but I feel like it's unheard of. But for those who don't know, this book follows a young girl called Star who lives in a very predominantly black neighborhood, but she goes to a private school in a predominantly white neighborhood. And one day she is in her neighborhood going to a party and she meets an old friend of hers. He ends up offering her a ride back home. So she takes up his offer and they're in the car, he's driving, they're talking to each other, and suddenly they get pulled over. And before she knows it, her friend is shot for basically doing nothing except for standing there and asking her if she's okay. Next thing she knows, he is shot like 3 times in the chest. So as the book continues, she is facing the aftermath of what had happened, trying to cope with the fact that one of her best friends is dead and trying to find justice for him. And this book was basically written as a response to police brutality as well as the Black Lives Matter movements. And the fact that all the struggles and problems portrayed in the book were actually real life situations and issues is what made this book stand out so much for me, and why I think this is definitely a book that if you haven't picked this up yet, then I don't know what you've been doing, but you should definitely pick up this book. And if you don't want to pick up this book, then go watch the movie, because I think that movie is also really well adapted. So we're finally at the last and final book that I want to recommend to everyone, and that is The Astonishing Color of After by Emily X.R. Pan. So this is a magical realism young adult novel that follows a young girl called Lee, whose mother recently committed suicide, and she now somehow believes that her mother has turned into a bird. She's also facing a lot of guilt because during the time when her mother committed suicide, she was actually outside making out with her longtime crush instead of at home taking care of her mother. So one day she sees this bird and she comes to believe that this bird is actually her mother, because the bird comes and appears with a package, and this package is filled with all of her mother's history. And so now Lee ends up going to Taiwan to finally meet her maternal grandparents for the first time, and from there she tries to connect with her grandparents, as well as every night she somehow gets magically transported into the past, where she finally finds out what truly happened between her mother and her parents, and why she herself has not met her grandparents her entire life. And while she also learns more about her past, she also finds out what she wants to do for her future. So I believe this is actually one of my favorites of 2018, and I did a book review on this really long time ago, so I will link that above somewhere for you guys to check it out. I loved how the author seamlessly connected with reality as well as the magical elements of this book. I also felt really connected with the characters, and possibly because I myself am Taiwanese American, so I was able to relate with what Lee was facing, what her mother was dealing with, as well as the fact that this book was actually set in Taiwan. So this book was actually very vivid to me, because while reading this book there were so many times when I actually was able to picture every part that Lee was exploring. But not only that, but the writing style was also very beautiful. So if you're looking for a very beautifully written novel, if you're looking for very vivid imagery of the setting, if you're looking for great characterizations, if you love magical realism, then this is definitely the book for you. So anyway, these are all the books that I want to recommend in this video. There's literally so many different types of genres for you guys, so hopefully there's at least one book for you guys out there. So anyways, let me know down below if there's another standalone that you highly recommend, that you want me to check out. If there's a book on here that you saw me recommending and for whatever reason you completely disagree, let me know as well, because I am curious. Some of these books definitely had some mixed reviews for sure, so I'm definitely curious to see everyone's opinions about these books. And if you have any idea in terms of future recommendations video, let me know down below as well. So anyways, that's all to say for this video. As always, if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe down below, don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!